All right, here we are again, and this is Lecture 16, and today I want to talk about a different concept, and hopefully this one isn't going to last very long. So what we're going to talk about today is what I want to refer to as the American political economy. That's a strange term, and we'll figure out what that means in just a second. So, how does this tie in with AP? I'm going to ask you to analyze the political and economic forces shaping the nature of power in the United States, and this corresponds with Key Concept 4.1 in your AP guide. So the first thing, of course, that we want to try to do is we want to figure out exactly what do we mean by a political economy. What is that? And this is a term that was coined back in the 18th century, and it is a reference to how political institutions and economic institutions influence each other and play off of each other. And as you've probably heard, the idea that money is power, well, that is a political economic term. And sometimes, power also equates to wealth. So we play off of each other. There are also some other differences that were developing during this time, and that has to do with the fact that in these early times, as with even today, there was a huge debate as to just how powerful should the central government be versus how powerful should the states be, and consequently, if we look at this from the point of view of a political economy, then we have to ask ourselves, well, then who's being served by institutions that create and generate wealth? So we also see a situation where we might have a little bit of competition going on between northern merchants who are making a lot of money through trade and later through industry, and plantation owners in the south who are making a lot of money through their agricultural production and their monocultures. So both of these sides started to become more entrenched during this time period. This is a quote from Alexander Hamilton, in which he sums up the political contests of his time quite well, political contests in which he was an active participant, which we will see in just a moment. He says, one side appears to believe that there is a serious plot, not a plat, to overturn the state governments and substitute a monarchy to the present republican system. The other side firmly believes that there is a serious plot to overturn the general government and elevate the separate powers of the states upon its ruins. The key to understanding this is this term, serious plat. No, serious plot, a whole different idea. The idea is here that almost like a conspiracy theory kind of thing, where every decision that is made by those who support a strong central government is perceived by the anti-federalists, those who prefer a weaker central government, as an actual conspiracy to overthrow the Republican form of government and actually install a monarchy or dictatorship or whatever the case may be. And of course, everything that is seen, everything that the Federalists see from the point of view of the anti-Federalists is an attempt to overthrow the central government. And, well, neither of these is probably true. There probably wasn't any serious plots one way or the other, although later on we will talk about a particularly serious plot that will ultimately end in the death of Alexander Hamilton. Oh, that will be a story for later on. Now, if there was a person during this time period who represented and was the personification of political economy, it was this fellow here, Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton was born in poverty, the illegitimate son, illegitimate heir, not an heir, but an illegitimate child in the West Indies. He makes his way into North America, and he is absolutely positively brilliant, becomes kind of a protege of George Washington, ultimately becoming Secretary of the Treasury and completely reshaping the way the United States, this brand new United States, does business economically speaking. So he was a very, very powerful and potent political figure. He's also a very powerful and potent center of economic thought in the United States. And this is going to be the keystone to political economy. He, Alexander Hamilton, more than any other single person, is going to redefine what it means to what the political economy in the United States actually means. What was Hamilton's role? Hamilton, of course, is going to be an advisor to George Washington and ultimately will be his Secretary of the Treasury, which means he's going to be the very, very first guy whose job it is to figure out and to determine United States fiscal policy. That's one of those really, really boring terms. It may be really, really boring, but it is also extremely important. Exactly what is fiscal policy? Well, fiscal policy is how the government raises money and what it does with that money, as opposed to monetary policy, which we'll talk about later on. So fiscal policy, how the government's going to make money, how it's going to raise revenue, and how it is going to spend that revenue, and how the government can help influence the stability of the marketplace. That is going to be Alexander Hamilton's job. He's the very first guy to do it. And as we know from earlier lectures, this was not the job to have unless you really, really wanted it. The finances of the United States were an absolute shambles. They were a wreck. And it was Alexander Hamilton's job to fix it and to get his plans through political opposition from ultimately none other than fellows like Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. No small task. Well, Alexander Hamilton is going to study the economic situation of the United States. He's going to put out a number of reports, but ultimately he's going to develop a plan by which the United States can get back on its feet, economically speaking. First part of this plan is, hey, look, guys, I know you really don't want to do it, but the central government is going to have to take on all of the debt that has been accrued by all of the states since the beginning of the American Revolution. We're just going to have to take on that debt and bring it onto ourselves. Now, a lot of politicians say, well, yeah, there's an awful lot of debt that was accrued because of the acts of the Second Continental Congress and the government under the Articles of Confederation. We're willing to take that on, but why should we take on the debts from the individual states? Why should somebody from Massachusetts be responsible for paying the debts of somebody in Delaware or South Carolina? Why should that be on them? And Hamilton's answer is going to be because the central government is going to be better able to pay off those debts, which means that if other investors and other creditors see that the United States is a worthy investment, they will be more inclined to do business with the United States. So it was really important to have the debt centralized and handled that way. Whereas if it was dependent upon the individual states, then each of the individual states might have a different, I hate to say credit rating because that wasn't something that was around at that time, but different, investors would be less likely to, say, invest in maybe Virginia than they might be to invest in Rhode Island or what have you, based on the economics of those individual states. You want to create a national currency. That's one of the problems with the Articles of Confederation. It's one of the problems now. Consolidate that debt and, here's the key, pay that debt back at face value. Many of these banknotes, these Continentals, were literally worth virtually nothing. And a lot of speculators and investors were buying up these debts at just almost at the paper value, almost at cost for the production of these of this currency, and with the hope that maybe at some point it would accrue some value. Well, what Hamilton's plan was is we're going to pay it off at the face value. So if you bought $1,000 worth of colonial banknotes, and you bought them for $1 because they were virtually worthless, well, Alexander Hamilton's saying you're going to get paid back for $1,000. So there go the conspiracy theories, and there go the accusations that Hamilton is pandering to money speculators and all that other kind of stuff. But Hamilton is sticking to his guns. Hey, we got to do this. We can't just pay back our debts at depressed values. That's not going to look good for the country. Secondly, Hamilton says what we need to do is we have these brand new, what he referred to as infant industries that were taking place in the United States, and he's saying, what we have to do is our few factories and industries that are producing can't compete with the massive factories that exist in Britain. So why don't we put protective tariffs on these industries and give them a chance to grow? The tariffs were going to be on imported goods. So if you are importing something from Britain, you're going to add a tariff to it, which means you're going to have to add the cost of the tariff to the cost of the good. And that means that somebody in the United States who might want to make that same product is going to be able to compete and maybe sell his product a little bit lower. And that way there, instead of doing business with the British import, you're going to do business with the American manufacturer and help build American manufacturing. That was the goal of these protective tariffs. Many people were upset about the idea of these protective tariffs because protective tariffs raise the cost and the value of the goods, which means you have to pay more in order to get these goods. And then thirdly, and very, very controversially, Alexander Hamilton supported the creation of a national bank. He said, hey, look, what we need to have is one central institution that is going to be able to print money and currency and make investments. And instead of just having a bank that is just owned by the government, what we're going to do is we're going to charter the bank. So the bank will be, in essence, working for the government, but it'll actually be owned by private individuals who are interested in making money, who are interested in making this institution profitable. This national bank would be empowered to print currency for the United States, and it would also be empowered to use government securities as payment in exchange for this currency, which of course is going to mean that if Alexander Hamilton wants to sell government securities, treasury bonds, and things like that, that it'll reinforce the value of the currency, and using the currency to pay for these treasury bonds actually increases the value of these bonds or these securities. So the reality is where is he getting these ideas from? Is the Bank of England. It largely mirrors the things that the Bank of England was doing already at that time. For the most part, northern merchants are going to be very happy about Hamilton's plans. They're going to have access to ready and stable capital. They're going to have a stabilized currency so that they know that any loans that they make or any loans that they take out are going to be repaid with somewhat equivalent value. They're also very happy about the idea of these high protective tariffs because that actually encourages businesses to come to them. So northern merchants are going to be very, very happy about this particular policy. Southern plantation owners, not so much, because it means that they're going to have to pay more for the things that they need to get from England. It also puts kind of a economic competition on their exports. England is our chief trading partner. So southern, especially in the South, plantation owners and even farmers in general are not going to like this plan at all. It's too costly. But ultimately, Hamilton, with a great deal of political skill and some compromising, is going to be able to get his plan through. Ultimately, he will get his national bank, and he will get the government to take on the debts, largely as a compromise with Madison over where to build the nation's capital. There was a huge debate at this time as to, hey, a lot of Northerners wanted the capital of the country to be in Philadelphia. A lot of people in the South said, hey, let's put it down on the Potomac. Ultimately, they're going to make a compromise, and part of the compromise of opening up the District of Columbia to build the nation's capital is going to be the acceptance of part of Alexander Hamilton's plan. The only difference, of course, is going to be the tariff itself is not going to be as high as Hamilton wanted it. The tariff was kept relatively low to provide a little bit of protection for industries, but also not to raise costs and raise the value of these goods too high. Another issue that has both political and economic implications is going to be the French Revolution. Shortly after the United States forms its constitution and actually is looking like it's going to be fairly successful at creating its brand new country, events are going to take place in France that are going to lead to the French Revolution. This is going to be a revolution based on the concepts of liberty, equality, and fraternity. And that is great news. That sounds really good to Americans, right? There is a certain ideological support that Americans are going to want to give to the French Revolution. It sounds an awful lot like the American Revolution. And after all, the French were partially responsible for helping the Americans gain their independence from Britain years earlier. Among those was one of the generals who actually fought in the American Revolution, the Marquis de Lafayette, is going to be a central figure in the French Revolution. In fact, the Marquis de Lafayette, when the French prison, the Bastille, is stormed, the Marquis de Lafayette will send a copy or send the keys to the Bastille to George Washington as a sign of his good intentions. However, those of you who are students of the French Revolution know things didn't go quite so well for the French during the French Revolution. Things started to go really, really badly once the Reign of Terror was instituted and people started to lose their heads, literally, in the guillotine. This was absolutely atrocious to many Americans, and even though they may have supported the principles of the revolution, it created a conflict because the outcomes of the revolution were getting pretty bad. More conservative elements in the United States are saying, whoa, this is going way too far. And, of course, they were correct. Lopping off heads is probably not good for your public relations. It's also going to create some foreign policy problems for the United States because don't forget, the United States entered into an alliance in 1778 with the French. And as a result of the French Revolution, guess what? France is going to end up at war with Britain again. So now it's France turning to the United States and saying, right? Hey, we helped you guys out. You can help us out. Fair is fair. And George Washington's in a position where he knows the United States is not ready to go to war with Britain. Not over this. George Washington is really adamant about staying out of these foreign conflicts. And in fact, all of his cabinet, including Jefferson, who was a supporter of the French Revolution, and Hamilton himself, these guys are saying, well, we don't think we really want to get involved in this. On the other hand, there was some influence on getting involved on the side of the French because one of the things that the British were doing was seizing American ships and impressing American soldiers, which we'll talk about in just a moment. There's also an economic conflict here, so this is tying in the idea of a political economy. The United States' chief trading partner was Britain, and Britain was now at war with France. And another idea is that, hey, wait a minute, with French ships blowing up English ships and English ships blowing up French ships, it's going to make some pretty nifty profits for American ships who can sail through and get their goods to market. So there are economic incentives to getting involved in this conflict on the side of Britain, and there's economic benefits to remaining neutral. So what exactly do we do? Well, during this time, the French are going to send an ambassador to the United States, referred to as Citizen Genet. Citizen Genet is going to become very good friends with Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was definitely a pro-French politician in the United States. He was definitely supportive of the aims and the goals of the French Revolution, although not necessarily the bloodiness of it. Hamilton, on the other hand, is going to tend to lean more toward the British. He had modeled his economic system after the British economy. He was definitely going to be pro-British, and after all, we want to keep our trade relations open with Britain. They are our chief trade partner. Well, Citizen Genet will try to get the United States to enter into this conflict with the British on the side of the French. He will learn, of course, that President Washington is not thinking that way. President Washington is saying, let's just remain neutral in this whole thing. and forget about, I mean, yeah, we have an alliance with the French, but on the other hand, we have an alliance with the French king, not necessarily with this new revolutionary government. We're going to stay out of this. And Citizen Genet is going to go around the countryside and he's going to try to start whipping up anti-Washington sentiment among the people of the country. And that's a bad idea. Washington was insanely popular. And once Citizen Genet, and there were some pro-French, pro-revolutionary groups that were starting to get up, and after a while Citizen Genet is getting up and making speeches and denouncing President Washington, and even Jefferson came up and said, "Whoa, wait a minute, dude, you've gone way too far. You can't try to influence our politics, and you can't try to influence our government. You're just an ambassador. Get out." Unfortunately for Jefferson, Jefferson's friendship with Citizen Genet really made him very unpopular with President Washington, and Washington and Jefferson severed their friendship, as far as I know, forever. Jefferson, who was the Secretary of State under Washington, is going to resign at the end of Washington's first term. Citizen Genet will be expected to leave. He does not leave the United States, but he does drop out of public life. He ends up marrying an American girl and becoming an American citizen. And as a result of this, President Washington is going to he's going to ask for and he's going to get from Congress a proclamation of neutrality in 1793. Finally, we are looking at some foreign policy victories, foreign policy with economic, consequences. So the first of these policy victories, well, not quite a victory, but victory-ish kind of thing. As I said earlier, one of the things that the British were doing was what we call impressment. What the British ships were doing is they were pulling up to American merchant ships, American vessels, going on those vessels and saying, okay, you, and you're now in the British Navy, let's go. And there wasn't really anything you could do about it. I mean, you can't fight these British warships. So they were taking these American sailors off, and I mean, if you're a sailor and you're on a ship, you're going to do what you're told. There's really nowhere to go, unless you want to go overboard, which it becomes a very long swim home. So you're going to do what you're told, even if you're not necessarily a British citizen. If you're in the British Navy, you're going to be working for the British Navy. John Jay, the Chief Justice, was sent to Britain to negotiate a treaty with the British to get them to stop their impressment of American sailors. He does largely fail at that. He does get an agreement from the British to pay back the American ships that had suffered from this impressment, and he establishes that the British are going to finally agree to withdraw all of their soldiers from the western frontier, America's western frontier in the Ohio Valley, which, let's face it, the British had already agreed to do that 10 years earlier. They actually made their agreement with John Jay, and now they're making the same agreement with him again. Turns out that they will actually follow through with it this time. But Jay brings this treaty home, and the treaty actually doesn't say anything about impressment. It simply says that the British agree to pay it back. But one of the things that the treaty does do is that it establishes that the United States and British are trade partners, and they're going to work these things out together. But an awful lot of people in the Americas, Jefferson and Madison, denounced Jay's treaty as a betrayal of American interests. Of course, the Jeffersonians and the Southern planter elite are convinced, of course, that Jay has sold out the United States. In fact, it wasn't Jay who sold out the United States. It turns out it was Alexander Hamilton who sold out the United States. Hamilton was very worried about how Jay was going to conduct these negotiations. He was a little concerned that it was going to get the United States involved. So actually, Hamilton kind of got in touch with some of his friends in Britain and said, "Here's the diplomatic strategy that Jay's going to use." "Oh, really? Well, we're going to use that too." So Jay was kind of undercut by good old Alexander Hamilton. Another very important victory, and probably even certainly more of a victory, is going to be Pinckney's Treaty in and around the same time. And Pinckney's Treaty is going to be establishing diplomacy with Spain. and going to make diplomatic concessions with Spain. The Spanish, upon looking at Jay's treaty, went, whoa, it sure looks like the United States and Britain are becoming closer and more aligned with each other, and that's a threat to us. So maybe what we need to do is concentrate our efforts on our missionaries in California and along the southwest of North America, and those southwest territories north of Florida, we're just going to get away with. Remember, Spain and the United States were in a state of conflict over this territory here. What was called by the United States their Southwest Territories. The United States was claiming these areas, Alabama, Mississippi, and Spain was also claiming these areas. Well, what Spain decided to do is say, you know what, you can have it. We're going to put we're going to create the Spanish-American border is going to be at the 31st parallel. Everything north of that is the United States. You can do whatever you want with it. Everything south of that is going to be Florida, Spanish Florida, and we'll do what we want with that. Of course, keeping Pensacola and places like that. It also allowed the United States navigation rights along the Mississippi River. The United States could, send off, take off its supplies and sell its goods in New Orleans without having to pay excessive taxes. And so it gives the United States access to New Orleans. Spain still owns it, but the U.S. is going to be able to get access to it. And overall, this is going to be a pretty good deal for the United States. Pinckney's treaty is brought to Congress, Jay's treaty is brought to Congress, and the decision is made as, okay, what we'll do is, if you agree to pass the Pinckney Treaty, which of course the Southern aristocracy liked the Pinckney Treaty because of all that land that opens up in the Southwest. If you guys agree to pass the Pinckney Treaty, if you guys agree to pass the Jay's Treaty, then we'll pass the Pinckney Treaty and we'll call it a day. So as another compromise in our political arena is going to be the passage of the Jay's and Pinckney's Treaty. So, but now what we're seeing set ourselves up for is we're seeing some very split political differences between the Hamiltonians and the Jeffersonians. We're seeing regional differences between North and South, and even to a certain extent the West. We're seeing that there are economic interests at play as well, with the interest of merchants conflicting with the interests of farmers. All of this is at play. All of this is going to shape American politics. And as I believe, the next class is going to actually talk about the formation of an American party system. And we'll talk about that next time. Till then, later.